Ever been told by your mother-in-law that you're not good enough for her son? Hit that subscribe button. Subscribe if you believe that people who judge your worth based on outdated standards eventually watch you build success they can't comprehend. Because what I'm about to tell you proves that sometimes the person who declares you inadequate ends up desperately needing what only you can provide. My name is Astrid. I'm 34 years old. And the day my former mother-in-law's closest friend came to my office begging for a job was the day I finally understood that living well isn't just the best revenge. It's the only revenge that matters. But before I tell you about that interview where decades of judgment came full circle, let me take you back to where love met contempt and ambition was born from spite, because every story of vindication starts with someone telling you that you'll never be enough. I met Donovan Pierce when I was 24 years old at a friend's birthday party in Seattle. I was working as a marketing coordinator at a small digital agency, building campaigns for local businesses and dreaming about eventually starting my own firm. Donovan was 26. An architect at a respected design company, charming and thoughtful in ways that made me feel seen. We talked for hours that night about our careers, our ambitions, and what we wanted from life. He didn't seem intimidated by my professional drive, which was refreshing after dating men who'd felt threatened by my success. We started dating seriously within weeks. Donovan was kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my work. He'd ask detailed questions about my campaigns, offer thoughtful feedback, and celebrate my wins like they were his own. 6 months into our relationship, I thought I'd found a true partner. Then I met his mother, Beatrice Pierce. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday brunch at her house in an affluent neighborhood where homes cost millions and appearances mattered more than authenticity. Beatrice answered the door wearing pearls and judgment in equal measure. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disappointment before offering a cool handshake. "You must be Astrid," she said, her tone suggesting I was something unpleasant Donovan had tracked in on his shoes. "Please come in." The brunch was excruciating. Beatrice asked pointed questions about my family background, my education, my career plans. Each answer I gave seemed to confirm her worst assumptions. "Your parents are divorced," she stated rather than asked when I mentioned my mother lived across the country. That must have been difficult growing up without a stable family structure. It was challenging, I admitted, but it taught me resilience and independence. Beatrice's lips pursed. Independence. Yes, I suppose that's one way to frame it. She turned to Donovan. "Darling, your father and I built our marriage on traditional values. Partnership, complementary roles. Understanding that family comes before individual ambition. Those foundations create stability." The implication was crystal clear. My independence and ambition were flaws, not strengths. I was being compared to some idealized version of womanhood that required subordinating personal goals to family expectations. Over the next year, as Donovan and I got more serious, Beatrice's disapproval intensified. She'd make comments about my career focus, suggesting it was unnatural for a woman to prioritize work over preparing for marriage and motherhood. She'd criticize my appearance, my cooking skills, my lack of interest in the country club activities she considered essential for proper socializing. When Donovan proposed after 18 months of dating, I was thrilled. He was wonderful and I loved him deeply. But the engagement also meant deeper entanglement with Beatrice, who immediately tried to control every aspect of wedding planning. "You'll need to quit your job once you're married," she announced during our first wedding planning meeting, as if this were obvious and non-negotiable. "Donovan's career will require significant entertaining and social obligations. You won't have time for outside employment." I stared at her in disbelief. "I'm not quitting my job. My career is important to me." Beatrice's expression hardened. "Marriage requires sacrifice, Astrid. Especially from wives. If you're not willing to prioritize Donovan's needs and his career advancement, perhaps you're not ready for marriage." Donovan, to his credit, defended me initially. "Mom, that's unreasonable. Astrid's career is as important as mine. We'll figure out how to balance everything together." Beatrice looked at her son with pity. "You're young and idealistic. But you'll learn that successful marriages require traditional structures. Your father's career flourished because I managed our home and social obligations. that freed him to focus entirely on building his law practice. I tried to build a relationship with Beatrice despite her constant criticism. I attended her book club meetings where the women discussed literature but mostly gossiped about whose daughters were marrying well. I joined her for charity event planning where the focus was less on helping people and more on being seen helping people. Every interaction confirmed that in Beatrice's world, a woman's value came from who she married and how well she performed traditional wife and mother roles. 3 months before our wedding, everything exploded. Donovan and I had dinner at his parents' house where Beatrice had invited several of her friends to meet me. Throughout dinner, she positioned the evening as showcasing me, but it felt more like an evaluation. The women asked questions about my wedding plans, my thoughts on having children, my understanding of what it meant to be a Pierce family wife. I answered honestly, explaining that Donovan and I planned to both continue our careers, that we'd figure out childcare if and when we had children, that we saw our marriage as a partnership of equals. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. After dinner, I overheard Beatrice talking to her friends in the kitchen. I'd gone to retrieve my purse and heard my name. "I don't know what Donovan sees in her," Beatrice said, her voice carrying clearly. "She's not wife material. She's too focused on her little marketing job, too independent, too modern in her thinking. She doesn't understand what marriage requires." One of her friends, a woman named Helena, agreed. "She's not from the right kind of family either. Divorced parents, middle-class background. She won't fit into your social circle, Beatrice. You need to make Donovan see that before it's too late." I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling humiliation wash over me. Not wife material. Too independent. Wrong background. Every insecurity I'd ever had about not being good enough was confirmed by women who decided my worth based on standards I'd never agreed to. I walked back into the kitchen, interrupting their conversation. They had the decency to look embarrassed at being overheard. "I came to get my purse," I said quietly, grabbing it from the counter. "And to let you know that I heard everything you said. Beatrice, you've made it clear from day one that I'm not what you wanted for Donovan. You're right that I'm not traditional wife material by your definition. I won't quit my career. I won't subordinate my ambitions. I won't spend my life performing for your social circle. But Donovan loves me anyway, and we're building a partnership based on mutual respect, not outdated gender roles." I left before anyone could respond. Donovan found me in the driveway, upset and angry. I told him everything I'd heard. His face went through several expressions before settling on frustrated resignation. "My mother has very specific ideas about how things should be," he said carefully. "She'll come around once we're married and she sees how happy we are." "Will she?" I asked. "Or will she spend our entire marriage making me feel inadequate because I don't fit her definition of a proper wife?" Donovan didn't have an answer. Over the next 3 months leading to the wedding, things got worse. Beatrice openly criticized me at every opportunity. She told mutual friends I was marrying Donovan for his family's money and status. She suggested to Donovan that he was making a mistake, that he should find someone more suitable. She made wedding planning miserable by fighting every decision that didn't match her vision. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had a breakdown. I loved Donovan, but I couldn't marry into a family where his mother would spend decades making me feel like I wasn't enough. "We need to postpone," I told Donovan one evening. "I can't marry you while your mother is actively campaigning against our marriage. This isn't sustainable." Donovan was devastated but understanding. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been asking you to tolerate unacceptable behavior because I didn't want to confront my mother. That's not fair to you." We postponed the wedding indefinitely. Beatrice was thrilled, convinced she'd won and that Donovan would eventually find someone more appropriate. Instead, Donovan and his mother had the confrontation that should have happened months earlier. He told her that her behavior was unacceptable, that if she couldn't respect me and our relationship, she'd have limited access to our lives. Beatrice was shocked that her son would choose a woman she disapproved of over her opinion. The family tension was unbearable. After several months of this, Donovan and I made the painful decision to end our engagement entirely. Not because we didn't love each other, but because the family dynamics were destroying our relationship. We can't build a healthy marriage on this foundation, I said, tears streaming down my face as we made the decision. Your mother will never accept me, and that will poison everything. I love you too much to watch you torn between us forever. Donovan agreed, though it broke both our hearts. We parted amicably, staying in touch as friends but acknowledging that sometimes love isn't enough when family opposition is this intense. I moved forward with my life, channeling heartbreak and anger into professional ambition. If I wasn't wife material according to Beatrice's standards, I'd prove that her standards were irrelevant to actual success and happiness. Over the next 3 years, I threw myself into my career with intensity fueled by equal parts ambition and spite. I was promoted to marketing manager, then senior marketing manager, then director of marketing at my agency. I built campaigns that won industry awards and attracted major clients. I became known for innovative strategies that delivered measurable results. But agency life had limitations. I was building success for someone else's company, following someone else's vision. I wanted to build something entirely my own, something that would prove I could succeed on terms Beatrice had never imagined. When I was 28 years old, I started my own digital marketing agency called Catalyst Creative. I used my savings, took out a small business loan, and convinced 3 talented colleagues to join me. We specialized in helping women-owned businesses build their brands and reach customers. The mission was personal. I wanted to support women building careers and companies despite people telling them they should focus on being wives and mothers instead. Catalyst Creative grew faster than I'd dared hope. We had 10 clients in our first 6 months, 30 clients by the end of year 1. Revenue climbed from barely covering expenses to generating real profit. I hired more staff, moved into a real office, and built a reputation for excellence that attracted bigger clients willing to pay premium rates. By year 3, Catalyst Creative had 45 employees and annual revenue exceeding $5 million. We'd worked with over 200 clients, won multiple industry awards, and been featured in business publications as a fast-growing agency led by a young woman entrepreneur. I'd built exactly the kind of success Beatrice thought was incompatible with being a good wife and mother. 5 years after Donovan and I ended our engagement, I ran into him at a coffee shop. The encounter was friendly but tinged with the awkwardness of shared history. "You look great," he said genuinely. "I've been following Catalyst Creative's success. You've built something really impressive." "Thank you," I replied. "How are you doing?" "I'm good," he said. "Got married 2 years ago. To someone my mother approved of," he added with a wry smile. "Someone traditional and suitable." "Are you happy?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly," he said, "I'm not sure. She's lovely, but there's no spark. No challenge. Everything is easy and pleasant and exactly what my mother wanted. But I miss the partnership we had." I felt sad for him but also vindicated. He'd chosen his mother's approval over building a marriage based on genuine connection and mutual respect. That choice had consequences. We parted amicably and I went back to building my business. 6 years after our breakup, when I was 31 years old, something unexpected happened. One of Beatrice's closest friends, Helena, the woman who'd agreed I wasn't from the right kind of family, requested a meeting with me. Her assistant called Catalyst Creative, asking if I'd be willing to meet with Helena about potential business opportunities. I was curious enough to agree. Helena arrived at my office looking significantly older and less confident than when I'd last seen her at that disastrous dinner. She sat across from my desk in the corner office I'd earned, clearly uncomfortable. "Thank you for seeing me," she started. "I know this must be awkward given our history." "I'm listening," I said neutrally, not making this easy for her. "I need a job," Helena said bluntly. "My husband left me 6 months ago for a younger woman. In the divorce, I discovered he'd been hiding assets and I got far less than I deserved. I have minimal work experience because I've spent 30 years being a society wife. I'm 58 years old and need employment." "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I knew exactly where this was going. "I've heard Catalyst Creative is an excellent place to work," Helena continued. "That you treat employees well, that you specifically support women rebuilding careers after life transitions. I'm asking if you'd consider hiring me despite our past history. The irony was almost too perfect. This woman who'd told Beatrice I wasn't wife material was now asking me for a job because being the perfect traditional wife had left her completely unprepared for real-world employment. What experience do you have? I asked professionally. Event planning through charity work, Helena said. Some public relations through social committees. Skills that translate to marketing but not direct marketing experience. Why should I hire you? I asked. Because I need the opportunity, she said honestly. And because I'm willing to acknowledge I was wrong about you. When you were engaged to Donovan, Beatrice and I judged you harshly for prioritizing career over traditional wife roles. We thought you weren't suitable because you had ambition beyond marriage. I see now how short-sighted and cruel that judgment was. You built something significant while I built nothing except a role as someone's wife. The apology was stunning in its honesty and humility. I sat quietly for a moment, processing this reversal of power dynamics. When you and Beatrice talked about me in that kitchen, I said finally, you said I wasn't from the right kind of family. That I wouldn't fit into your social circle. That I wasn't wife material. Do you remember saying those things? Helena's face flushed with shame. Do. And I'm deeply sorry. I was parroting Beatrice's judgments without thinking critically about whether they were fair or accurate. You didn't deserve that cruelty. I appreciate the apology, I said. But I'm not sure it's enough to justify hiring someone who actively tried to sabotage my relationship because she thought I wasn't good enough. I'm not asking you to forget or forgive, Helena replied. I'm asking for an opportunity to prove I've learned from my mistakes and that I'm capable of growth. I'm willing to start at entry level, to work my way up, to do whatever it takes. I told Helena I'd consider her application and would let her know. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about revenge, grace, and what kind of person I wanted to be. I could reject Helena's application and no one would fault me. She'd been cruel when I was vulnerable. But I'd built Catalyst Creative specifically to support women, even women who'd made mistakes or needed second chances. Was I going to abandon those principles because of personal history? I called Helena 2 days later and offered her a position as an events coordinator, entry-level despite her age, with opportunity to advance based on performance. The salary was modest but fair. The expectations were high. She accepted gratefully. Over the next year, Helena proved to be a dedicated employee. She worked hard, learned quickly, and brought her considerable event planning experience to bear on client projects. She was humble, acknowledging when she didn't know something and asking for guidance. Watching her rebuild her professional identity was fascinating. She'd spent decades defining herself through her husband's success and her social status. Now she was learning to find value in her own contributions and capabilities. 8 months after Helena started, another one of Beatrice's friends, a woman named Cordelia, applied for a position at Catalyst Creative. Then another, Sylvia, who'd been at that terrible dinner. All of these women were facing similar situations. Divorces that left them financially vulnerable. Adult children who no longer needed them. Identities built entirely around being wives and mothers crumbling when those roles ended or changed. They were coming to me because Catalyst Creative had a reputation for supporting women in transition. But also, I suspected, because Helena had told them I was willing to give second chances despite our history. I hired Cordelia and Sylvia after thorough interviews where I made them acknowledge their previous judgments of me. I wanted them to understand that the woman they'd dismissed as not wife material was now the person controlling their employment prospects. The power dynamic reversal was complete. These women who judged my worth based on my willingness to be a traditional wife were now working for me, learning from me, depending on me for their financial stability. Then, 2 years after Helena first came to my office, I got a call that I'd been half expecting and half dreading. Beatrice Pierce wanted to meet with me. Not through an assistant or an intermediary. Beatrice herself called my office and asked if I'd be willing to have coffee with her. I agreed, curious about what could possibly prompt this outreach. We met at an upscale cafe in downtown Seattle. Beatrice looked older, more worn down than when I'd last seen her. The confidence and judgment she'd worn like armor seemed diminished. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said once we'd ordered. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see." "You're right about that," I agreed. "Why are you here, Beatrice?" "I need to apologize," she said, the words clearly difficult. "For how I treated you when you were engaged to Donovan. For the things I said about you not being wife material. For trying to sabotage your relationship with my son because you didn't fit my narrow definition of what a proper wife should be." "What prompted this apology?" I asked. "Guilt. Regret," she said. "Watching my friends Helena, Cordelia, and Sylvia work for you and rebuild their lives after their marriages ended. Seeing how you've supported them despite how they treated you. Understanding that everything I valued, traditional marriage, social status, women subordinating careers to family, left my friends completely unprepared for real life when their marriages failed. And Donovan," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "He's miserable. He married someone I approved of, someone traditional and suitable. They have 2 children and a beautiful home. But there's no real partnership, no intellectual connection. He told me recently that he regrets listening to me instead of fighting harder for you. That the biggest mistake of his life was letting my judgment matter more than his own heart." I sat quietly, absorbing this. "So you're apologizing because your judgment led to bad outcomes for people you care about," I said. "Not because you actually believe your judgment was wrong." Both Beatrice insisted. "I'm apologizing because I was wrong about what matters in marriage and in life. I valued appearances and tradition over substance and genuine partnership. I thought women should subordinate their ambitions to support their husbands. You proved that framework is nonsense. You built a successful business. You're supporting women I thought were set for life because they married well. You've accomplished more than I ever did. And you did it by rejecting everything I told you a proper woman should prioritize." The admission was stunning coming from someone who'd been so certain of her judgments years ago. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing," Beatrice said. "I'm not here asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong about you. Completely, fundamentally wrong. You were exactly the kind of partner Donovan needed, and I destroyed that because I was more concerned with my vision of propriety than with his actual happiness." We finished our coffee with awkward small talk. As we were leaving, Beatrice paused. "Would you ever consider having dinner with Donovan and me?" she asked. "Not to revisit the past, just to let me show you that I've genuinely changed my views about women, careers, and marriage." "I'll think about it," I said non-committally. Over the next few months I did think about it. About forgiveness and grace. About whether maintaining anger served me or just kept me tethered to old wounds. About what kind of woman I wanted to be now that I'd proven everything Beatrice said I couldn't do. I eventually agreed to dinner at a neutral restaurant. Donovan was there. Still kind but visibly worn down by a life that looked perfect but felt empty. Beatrice was humble in ways I'd never seen, acknowledging repeatedly how wrong she'd been. The dinner was civil, even pleasant. But it didn't change anything fundamental. The past couldn't be undone. Donovan and I had both moved on, our lives diverging in ways that couldn't be rewoven together. Beatrice's growth was real but came too late to repair what she'd broken. What the dinner did do was give me closure. I'd spent years angry about how Beatrice had judged me, how her standards had nearly convinced me I wasn't enough. Seeing her acknowledge she'd been wrong, seeing Donovan realize he'd sacrificed genuine connection for his mother's approval, watching this family grapple with consequences of valuing tradition over truth, all of it finally released the grip those old wounds had on me. I didn't need Beatrice's approval anymore. I'd never needed it. I'd built success, happiness, and purpose without it. 3 years after that dinner, when I was 34 years old, Catalyst Creative had grown to over 100 employees and annual revenue exceeding $20 million. We'd expanded to 3 offices in different cities. We'd helped over 1,000 businesses build their brands. Most importantly, we'd created a workplace culture that valued women's contributions regardless of their marital status or family choices. Helena had been promoted to director of events, proving herself invaluable in securing and managing major client accounts. Cordelia ran our public relations division. Sylvia headed up our content creation team. These women who'd once judged me for not being wife material were now senior leaders at a company I'd built, contributing to success they'd once thought was incompatible with being a proper woman. One afternoon, Helena knocked on my office door with an unusual request. Beatrice asked if she could visit the office. Helena said carefully, "She wants to see what we've built here." She promised not to cause any disruption, just to observe and understand. I was surprised but agreed. Beatrice arrived the next week, dressed professionally but not ostentatiously. I gave her a tour of our offices, introduced her to employees who spoke enthusiastically about our culture and mission, showed her the wall of awards and press features documenting our growth. She was quiet throughout, absorbing everything. At the end of the tour, we sat in my office. "This is remarkable," she finally said. "You've built something that genuinely helps people while being financially successful. You've created opportunities for women like my friends who were told their value was tied to their husbands. You've proven that everything I believed about women and careers was wrong." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. "But I didn't build this to prove you wrong, Beatrice. I built it because I wanted to create something meaningful. Your judgment was a catalyst, but this company exists because of my vision, not because of your limitations." "You're right," Beatrice acknowledged. "And that's what makes this even more impressive. You didn't let my cruelty define you or limit you. You used it as fuel, but you built something much bigger than revenge." Before she left, Beatrice asked one more question. "Do you think Donovan and you could ever?" She trailed off. "No," I said firmly but kindly. "That chapter closed years ago. We both moved on. He has a family. I have a company. Neither of us is the same person we were when we were engaged." Beatrice nodded sadly. "I destroyed something good because I couldn't see past my own prejudices. That's something I have to live with." After she left, I reflected on the journey from that terrible dinner where I'd overheard her call me not wife material to this moment where she'd toured the empire I'd built. The irony was perfect, but the satisfaction was different than I'd expected. I'd imagined that proving Beatrice wrong would feel triumphant, that watching her eat her words would be sweet revenge. Instead, it felt more like closure. Her approval or disapproval no longer mattered because I'd built an identity entirely separate from her judgment. 6 months later, I got an invitation to Donovan's daughter's birthday party. His wife had apparently heard about me from Beatrice, and was curious to meet the woman her mother-in-law spoke about with such regret. I declined politely. Some doors should stay closed even after apologies and acknowledgments. My life had moved forward in ways that didn't include Donovan or his family. That same month, I was invited to speak at a Women in Business conference about building companies that support women's ambitions. I talked about my journey from being told I wasn't wife material to building a multi-million-dollar company. I talked about the women working for me who'd once judged me but who'd been willing to learn and grow. I talked about using rejection and judgment as fuel for ambition rather than letting it define your limitations. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me afterward sharing their own stories of being told they had to choose between career and family, between ambition and being a good wife or mother. They thanked me for proving those were false choices, for building something that demonstrated women could define success on their own terms. That speaking engagement led to more invitations. I became known as someone who'd turned judgment into jet fuel, who'd built success specifically to prove that traditional definitions of women's worth were obsolete. My story resonated because so many women had faced similar judgment from mothers-in-law, from families, from society telling them their ambitions were incompatible with being good partners or mothers. 2 years later, Catalyst Creative was acquired by a major marketing conglomerate for $45 million. I retained leadership of the division and received enough money to secure my financial future permanently. At 36 years old, I was wealthy, successful, and completely independent by any measure. The acquisition party was held at a beautiful venue overlooking the city. My employees, clients, investors, and industry colleagues filled the room celebrating what we'd built together. Helena, Cordelia, and Sylvia were there, having become genuine friends despite our rocky history. They'd grown from women who judged others based on traditional standards to women who understood that success came in many forms. Near the end of the evening, I saw Beatrice standing near the entrance. She hadn't been invited, but she'd apparently heard about the event and wanted to be present for this milestone. I walked over to her. "You came," I said simply. "I wanted to witness this," she replied. "To see the culmination of everything you built. Everything I almost prevented from happening by trying to convince Donovan you weren't good enough." We stood quietly for a moment. "You know what's interesting," I finally said. "You thought I wasn't wife material because I prioritized career over traditional roles. But the women whose friendships you valued, whose lives looked perfect because they did everything right according to your standards, they all ended up needing careers when their perfect traditional lives fell apart. Maybe the question isn't whether I was wife material. Maybe the question is whether your definition of wife material was designed to keep women dependent rather than fulfilled." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "You're right. About all of it. I wasted years judging women for wanting more than what I'd been taught to value. I hurt you, I hurt my son, I hurt my friends by telling them their worth was tied to their husbands. I can't undo that damage, but I want you to know I spend every day regretting it." I looked at this woman who'd once held such power over my sense of self-worth and felt nothing but distant pity. She'd built her identity on being the arbiter of proper behavior, the guardian of traditional values, the judge of who was and wasn't worthy. That identity had crumbled as the world changed, and as the women she'd judged proved more resilient than the standards she'd imposed. "I'm glad you've grown," I said sincerely. "But I didn't build this for your approval or to prove you wrong. I built it because I wanted to create something meaningful that would support women regardless of whose definition of worthiness they did or didn't meet. Your judgment was painful, but it wasn't definitive. That's what I want every woman to understand." Beatrice nodded, understanding that this was as close to forgiveness as she'd receive. She left shortly after, and I returned to celebrating with people who'd actually supported my journey. Today, I run a division of a major marketing company. I mentor women entrepreneurs, and I invest in women-led businesses. The woman who was once told she wasn't wife material became someone whose professional judgment and leadership create opportunities for hundreds of people. If this story showed you that people who judge your worth based on outdated standards eventually become irrelevant to your success, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about turning judgment into fuel and building success that proves critics wrong without seeking their validation. Drop a comment about a time someone told you that you had to choose between ambition and being a good partner or parent and how you proved that was a false choice. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving specific people wrong but building something so successful that their approval becomes completely unnecessary to your happiness and fulfillment. See you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy watching karma, payback, come full circle every week, we dive into tales of betrayal and poetic justice. Don't miss the next one. Tap the subscribe button and join the Revenge Squad.